was not nice.
So you heard that.
I can hear you.
That's funny. I think everybody else can too. Okay, we started now. Welcome to TORAH Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Hebrew for Fun and Profit with Gavriel Sanders. Thank you, Gavriel, for your many, many hours of dedication and hard work. Thank you, sir. And just to be clarify, I'll tell you our episode number in just a second. Number 19, it looks like. Baruch Hashem.
You say 19, I say 18. I don't know. We're off.
You know what? So. It's probably me because I think you probably have got a better track on the actual number than I do. What happens is in the beginning, if I missed like episode 3 and 4 and I duplicated one, that's where it comes from. I got to go way back in the archives and find out why. So very good. Well, it's good to see you again. As always, I long for the day that I get to come and visit you there. That's just going to be a really sweet time. So,
wait until it's not 15 degrees Fahrenheit.
You've got my vote on that. Trust me. No doubt about it. Okay, cool.
We had 60 yesterday for Shabbat. It was really a bracha, a real blessing from Hashem, and all the snow, most of the snow, which we had plenty of last week.
Wow. Kind
of went away. So anyway, Baruch Hashem, everything's good.
Awesome.
We've been following with some intrigue. I don't know how many are aware of this little bit of news, but there was an El Al flight that left New York last night, somewhat after midnight, maybe close to 1 o'clock. On board was the coffin of someone that my wife knew, the wife of a very well-known rabbi today, Rabbi Beryl Wine, who's a well-known Jewish historian. And she was her former husband, who had passed away, was I think he might have been the founder, or not founder, but director of the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, back in the 60s, 70s, and Rabbi Cohen. So anyway, we went to the funeral last night, not far from here, where we live. And then they rushed to the airport to those who were the mourners, the family, to get on that plane. So that flight left, and of course the route for that LL flight 008, as it is for most flights, is to go over Canada, kind of the northern route and down. You know, they take that they don't go straight, because that actually ends up being longer. So about 3.5 hours into the flight, whatever it was, 3 hours into the flight, they're just heading out over the northern Atlantic, and there was some mechanical issue that happened, and so they did a quick U-turn and landed at a military base, Canadian military base, called Goose Bay in Canada, where it was 15 below. And they, if you look at the time right now, which is according to New York time, it's 7:10 p.m. They took off about an hour ago, having landed at about 4 a.m. local time there. So they were well over 12, 13 hours, and they couldn't get off the plane because there was no customs set up to process anybody. It was a military base. You know, they weren't set up for 300 plus people to be sitting there. So,
right.
But everyone did amazingly. We saw a video from the plane. It was a big, what we call Kiddush Hashem. It was a big, how would you translate that into English? It was something that really brought credit to Hashem's name. As far as the people sitting on board, singing, praying, learning,
nice.
Helping each other, getting everybody through it all. So, Bezrat Hashem, they're over the Atlantic now on their way, about 7.5 hours more to go. Wow. And so that this dear lady can be buried. I mean, people were waiting in Israel. The whole thing was very bizarre. But who knows, what was prevented or what the purposes are, the bigger picture, about.
Right,
we just, as we used to say, we just see the threads on the bottom side of the tapestry and not the big picture up above.
Right.
So Anyway, Baruch Hashem.
Wow.
Today's program is a bit of a show and tell. We haven't done this for a while. If you look at the title that's here, this is your Hebrew language learning magazine. And so while we do some things like we did last time where we learned that song, Ani Tamid Nishar Ani, where we learned a lot of different opposites, and it was a really famous, well-known kid song that every Israeli grows up with, basically. So along with that, not just because it was a kid song, it was kind of simple, but also we try to bring in music as well that has significance to Israeli culture, to increase people's, I call it Israeli literature, the cultural literacy. Today, I want to talk a bit about some tools for serious Hebrew learning. We tackle that periodically at different levels, and so some of this we're going to actually reach back in time and look at some things that have come out which are still findable out there. I took a look on Amazon in particular, that all-encompassing repository of everything you'd ever or never want. So I'm going to bring some of those to your attention, and you can, if you want a copy of this program in terms of just the PDF, the visual images that I'm giving you right now, you're certainly welcome to write to me. I'll give you the email address at the end there so you can do that. Nice. So today we're going to cover that, and then there's also an audio feature that I want to bring to your attention. And then there's a new segment that you and I were talking about starting that we'll talk about at the very end. So that's kind of where we're going. Is that all right?
Perfect. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And by the way, thank you for on behalf of everybody that is part of the Tanakh Talk, that program with a funny name. The Tanakh Talk family extended around the world. I hear from people from South Africa. How's it?
Wow.
And from all other different places, just Australia, around the U.S., North America. It's just great to have all of us together in this growing family of finding our way to Hashem in this the age in which we are. So whether you're still in the church trying to figure out why am I here, what do I really believe, do I believe because it's true? Is it true because I believe it? We've discussed that before. Right. Or you've come out of the church and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I do now? And maybe you live like you do in the middle of nowhere. And so how do if I want to become part of a Jewish community, how does that work for me? A lot of questions, so, but sure. In the meantime, you're not alone. You've got this sort of, digital two-dimensional family resource here that people are all reaching out and helping each other. And Rabbi Skobac has talked about this, and Rabbi Singer and others that you have on the program, on the programming lineup that there's just nothing like Tanakh Talk out there. So
that's wonderful.
You know that because it's your life.
It is my life, for sure. Thank you for that. For sure.
Well, I appreciate it. I also want to mention to anybody that, if you never really talk about supporting this program, but I know it costs money. So if anybody listen, it could be $5, $10, whatever. Anything helps to pay for, just storage, digital storage, programming, a piece of equipment, little maintenance, whatever. It all adds up and it all helps. So don't be hesitant to ask, because we all appreciate the time that you provide us. So now there's this big movement that's been growing over the last number of a couple decades, really 2-3 decades, called the Hebrew Roots movement. But I want to get back to the real Hebrew roots. Now, can you see my mouse moving around here, my cursor?
I can. Yes, sir. Okay, good.
So many years ago, like around 1981, this book came out on the English side, Roots, this Hebrew side, Shorashim. You can still find a few used copies out there. And this book really illustrates the magic and the wonder and the mystery of Hebrew, that everything kind of grows from a common root that you see down here and branches out into sometimes nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs and gerunds, like, well, what's that? And here is I just took a copy of a page, took a photo of a page from my book and put it up here so you could see. Let's go over here to the right side. You can see the word darach. And if you're familiar with the word derech, it's a very common word, derech, which means way. You can see it here, derech. But there are a lot of different words that are related to this root. Some of them are verbs, some of them are nouns, some are adjectives. For example, derech, a way or a road. Derech Chevron, for example, the way to Hebron, or Hebron. A darkon is a passport. Why? Because you need that to get on your way. Hidrich, or the word madrich, the next word here, madrich, that's what I am. I'm a madrich l'safa ha'ivrit. I'm a guide to the Hebrew language. A tadrich. I remember this. That's like a guidebook. One of the first things I ever bought was two guidebooks. One was by Zev Vilnai, a very famous Israeli tour guide from back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I think I still have a tattered copy somewhere. And another book, this will really date me, Israel on $5 and $10 a day. So, and you didn't want to stay in any of those places that cost $5 or $10 a day.
Right.
Believe me,
right.
I did it once. Hadracha is something that you go to a spiritual person for guidance. Hadracha. It comes that's a noun that's derived from this word madrich, because the word madrich, which is both a noun and a verb, interestingly enough. So if you're getting a little lost in there in the grammar talk, don't worry. We'll turn it off in just a moment. And a midracha is a pavement. You can see how that fits. And daruch is the tense. So you say, well, how does that work? Not exactly sure. There are some of these words derived from roots, and it's not totally clear exactly how it fits. But the main thing to note here is that, in English, if we talk about a book and a library and an author, those are very disparate words. But in Hebrew, they all derive from a common source. For example, sefer, book, sofer, a writer, sifriya, a place where you keep all your books, like behind me. It's my sifriya, my library. So you see this beautiful branching out from a common roots. And so one of the points of focus that if you're serious about learning the Hebrew language is you'll want to give some attention to learning roots. And if you can ever find a copy of this particular book, which again, I think it's out of print, but you can find a few copies on Amazon. I would snap them up if I were you. Then go for that. Here's oops, let me go back here a second, sorry. Here's another word that's rather common, especially in, let's say, in Jewish or yeshiva talk. There's some of the words we hear a lot in here. The word darash, he demanded. But a drisha could be used for a demand. But if we come down here to where we see here, drishat shalom, it actually means a greeting. It literally means demand or require peace. So when I say to somebody, drishat shalom la'aba, which means, basically it means give my regards to my greeting of peace to so-and-so, to Abba in this case, to my father, or yeshlach drishat shalom, you have, saying to a woman, you have a drishat shalom, you have a greeting from somebody. And it's like inquiring about one's peace. So drisha can be a demand, or it can also be an inquiry about something. Something that's darush is demanded. A sermon is a drasha. So on Shabbat morning, my Rabbi Feiner down the street, stands up and gives a 15-minute. Now, where I come from in my old previous preacher life, 15 minutes was barely an introduction. We'd go for 45 minutes to an hour and just be getting warmed up. But a drasha is about 15 minutes, and it's a sermon. Someone who gives that is known as a darshan, and what he's doing is darshanut. Darshanut is preaching. Midrash, we think of midrash as a kind of homiletical interpretation of Torah. When we talk about pardes, we talk about pshat, the simple meaning of the word. We talk about remez, the hinted meaning of the Torah. Drash, which is the homiletical or expository side of it. And then there's something called sod, which is the hidden meaning of Torah, the mystical meaning of Torah. So midrash relates to that, and Beit Midrash is really a study house. So down the street from me, to the left, is the big congregation Knesset Israel, and then to the right is another congregation that's really mostly a Beit Midrash. It's more of a study hall, and a yeshiva is also that kind of. It's a Beit Midrash. It's a house of learning. That's what it literally means, a house of searching or studying. So you can see how beautifully all these different words are related, and it's much easier to study Hebrew words sort of in a constellation of commonality. So there are other, maybe some other books out there that do this, but this particular book does it quite well. So if you can find it, if you're watching this tonight live, as some of you are, I got my eye over here on my iPhone to see the stream going, then I heartily suggest you jump onto Amazon and grab yourself a copy of this book by Mordechai Kabant and Edwin Samuel. Another book that's also available at varying price levels, I think it's out of print, is this one by Asher Tarmon and Ezri Uval, called just simply Hebrew verb tables. And in the same way that I put up here on the right, that if you learn one from each pattern, you can recognize and generate many more. So this book is set up with tables, and there are quite a few tables in here, that show you how a particular verb in a particular category is fleshed out, let's say, in its present tense, its past tense, its future tense, and this word imperative simply means the command form. So here, for example, we have the word lisgor. Up at the top here, we have what's known as the infinitive form. Infinitive simply means to whatever. Here it's to close, okay? To close. Down here it's lilmod, to study. So when we work that way, you can see that there are these what are known as infixes and suffixes and prefixes. They're just things that are either planted within the word or attached to the word front or back. There's a technical term for those called pre- and post-nominal suffixes. Oh boy, that's putting me to sleep already. All it is attachments that are clues to you as to what's the time involved here, what's the gender involved here, what's the number involved here. Am I talking about something that's right now, present, and I'm dealing with one individual, and it's like me, I, for example, ani soger. That's what this is for here. In the command form over here is if I said to somebody, skorat hadelet, close the door. Now, there's a softer way that we use the imperative in Hebrew, by the way, for those of you that are a little more advanced level, if you're familiar with this concept here. We tend to use the future tense as a more polite form of the imperative, because imperative is very strong in Hebrew. So if I say to you, nu tiskorat hadelet, which really means you will close the door, it's just a politer way of using something. Imperative you usually use if I just really want to sock it to somebody, so.
Gotcha.
So be nice. Okay. Now, Israelis are known for their abruptness and their directness, right? So, but anyway, this particular book is a real powerful tool. I've had mine, used mine for years. I teach from it, provide some of these tables to my students. Another really fascinating and useful part is that you see these little words over here on the side. These are all verbs, roots really, these three-letter roots that follow exactly the same pattern here. So you could take 80 of these words that are in here and using the same infixes or prefixes and suffixes, it follows exactly the same pattern. These here follow exactly the same pattern as this. That's why we say if you learn one, you really know them all from that particular category.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay, and so also up here, you can't see it so well because it's a little dark, shaded, but it tells you, so this is the word binyan, and if binyan is related to the word bina, to know, or to build, binyan means building, but in Hebrew, when it comes to verbs, we really have like 7, we call them binyanim, 7 buildings. I like to think of it really as the verbs are all like an apartment building with 7 floors. And each of those floors is a particular category of one of these verbs. And there's a couple forms that are active, and there's actually 3 forms that are active, and there's 3 forms that are passive, and there's one that's kind of known as reflexive. Like if you know the word lehitraot, you can hear that lahit. When you hear a word that starts with lahit, something, lahit pashet, to undress, lahit labesh, to dress, lahit kaleach, to shower, lahit galeach, to shave. Those are things that are reflexive, things I'm doing for myself. Ani mitlabesh, I'm dressing myself. As opposed to another word like ani malbish, I'm dressing the child.
So what about like the word or the phrase lehitraot?
Yes. Okay, so lehitraot literally means to see each other.
Okay.
That's literally what it means.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's used as see you later. There's a diminutive, smaller form of that word that's just called lahit. You often hear people say lahit, and they're meaning lehitraot. Now that pattern, lehitraot, shows up in this book, and you'll see the word lehitraot up at the top, and then it's broken into, it tells you what binyan or what floor of that apartment building is the lahit pattern, and it has a particular name to it. I won't bore you with all those details because I don't like to do too much language about language. And then there are some peculiarities to the verbs, that fall into what are called a few subcategories. And it also gives you then the shorish here, the root of it, here, the 3-letter root that's here. So this is a very, very useful book, and it's useful in terms of you can study it yourself. You learn 1, you learn 2, you learn 3 from each category over time, and you've got it. Another book that's very helpful, and it's a little fuzzy to read because the picture didn't come out well, but this is one that out of print, but you can still find a few copies. Everything you want to know about Hebrew verbs and more. I really wish they'd come out with this book again. I've thought about getting in touch with the authors. It was done, I think, back in the 80s. 338 pages, over 1,300 roots with verbs, nouns, and adjectives related. Now, this was done, I think, on a typewriter or something, I don't know, IBM Selectric, I'm not sure what it was. But it gives you over here the to form of the word, and it gives you the English, it gives you the root to it, and it tells you what prepositions might be used, like is it one that goes with by or with or from, and then many other aspects that come along with it, that as far as that root breaks down into different parts of speech. It shows you if there's a noun associated with that root, a verb associated with the root, an adjective associated with that root, a gerund associated with the root. What's a gerund? It's very simple. A gerund is like a verbal noun. Walking is fun. Okay. Eating is great. It sounds like a verb, but it's being used as a noun.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Talking Hebrew is fantastic. Okay, that's a gerund. It's a verbal noun. Usually has ing on the end of it in English. And Hebrew has these also, but they obviously don't have ing. So this is a great book that I recommend. If you can find it, snap it up, because it's a resource that you use for the rest of your life, really. I have. Now, we're going to get a little rainbow-like, and you look at all this, and I can't begin to go through each one of these, but I'm going to point you to a website that I think you'll find very, very useful. And I'm going to go through this. This is from the Hebrew site. They have an English page as well. I'll give you the reference to that. And this is where the real meat and potatoes are. If you're really serious about having a Hebrew study library and going through things systematically and planning for your own course of study that is going to last a while. You could be busy. You could be busy here with something that goes 4 or 5 years with all that's here. This is known as the Succeed in Hebrew website. I use some of these books here in my own classes, whether it's private tutoring that I do or in the high school where I teach. And so the green here, we've got 2 different versions of to Succeed in Hebrew, the beginner's level. They come with CDs as well. The difference between one is just Hebrew only, and there's another one that has some English instructions in it, the one on the right. Then you have a next level. There's a kind of 2 parts. There's a B and a C, or a Beit and a Gimel, advanced levels that are here. The Beit level is higher level reading passages from literature, Zionism, Judaism. There's spelling exercises, verb drills, things like that. If you're into that sort of thing. If you're not, there's other resources for you. And the next level, the yellow one, expands on that and goes to higher levels, literature, communication, psychology. Pretty sophisticated stuff. Very, very useful. The next, the orange and the red, you've got to Succeed in Hebrew expression, grammar, and composition. Here's one that is really, really good to put you to sleep at night. Succeed in Hebrew verbs and syntax. I happen to like this book very, very much, because when it comes to syntax, that is not a penalty that you pay for sinning, by the way. the Hebrew word for syntax is tachbir, comes from the word chibur, and it means it has to do with connecting. Also has to do with composition, but it really has to do with connecting, and that's where we get into more sophisticated levels of what we know as compound sentences. Johnny likes tea, Linda likes tea, Johnny and Linda like tea. I took two simple sentences, made a compound sentence. Let's make a contrastive one. Johnny likes tea, but Linda hates it. Okay, there's another one, but I used a contrastive connector, the word but. So Hebrew has a lot of these things, words like in order to, however, and in contrast. So these things, as you start to get more sophisticated in how you speak or how you write, having these kind of chibur, what are known as milot chibur, connector words, are very, very important. And so this particular book, a little higher level, is great for that. There's another book here on to succeed in Hebrew spelling. There's another that's just dedicated to the holidays and special events. And then one that I think really would be more entry level for a lot of people is to succeed in basic Hebrew. There's 3 volumes, Hebrew, Aleph, Beit, and Gimel. And so where do you find all this? Well, you can go to this particular website. The author of these books is Meira Maadia, is her name. You can see it over here, kind of in the pinkish color here. And Meira Maadia is an MA graduate in Hebrew language and Judaic studies. She's very good. And you can go to the site. She doesn't give the prices. You have to kind of call for that information. So, and if you're a teacher of Hebrew or you want to use these in your school or something and make copies, big no-no. Strong copyright on this. So it's best to get it for your own self-study. So that said, I kind of want to segue toward something that can help you if you've a couple of questions that came my way. I've left the church, but I love Hashem and His Word. What copy of the Scriptures should I read now? I was at someone's home not too long ago who is what's known as a ger, a convert like me, and person brought out the old New American Standard. It's like all marked up with all the verses and things from before. Not recommended for current study. So if you're looking for a really comfortable, readable edition of the Bible, the Jewish Bible, then I strongly recommend the Art Scroll English Tanakh. If you go to the Art Scroll website, you can take a look at some sample pages. I think the actual commentary there is on Isaiah 53, as a matter of fact. Yes, I know it is, because I put it there a number of years ago. Another question that comes up is, well, I'm learning to read the Hebrew Bible, but I don't want the meaning to get lost. In other words, am I just reading something that I have no understanding of? That feels kind of awkward and wooden to me. Is there a way that I can read the text, but also get a sense of what I'm reading at the same time? Well, what can I study? Well, the answer to that, of course, is the Art Scroll Schottenstein Interlinear Chumash. And if you look up here at the top, then you'll see, for example, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. It's the Genesis 1:1. But here, just below, you can see. So when you're sounding out Bereshit, your eyes can just pick this up very quickly, so you know what you're reading, right? So now this has a lot of meaning to you. So you're not just reading something that's just so many syllables that you can't comprehend, so to speak, but it has meaning to you. So that then leads us into something else that I wanted to suggest for people to work on, because I know that so many of the people that share in this program, Hebrew for Fun and Profit, and other programs that you have here are really interested. Their deep-seated, heartfelt goal is to connect with the Hebrew Bible. I know that's yours, Say yes, it's the right answer.
Yes, that's the right answer.
And so I want to help you get there. And part of what's needed is not just through the eye gate of reading, but also through the ear gate of listening.
Nice.
And so I found a resource where about 70% of the Jewish Bible is read in Hebrew with a Sephardi accent. That is the Hebrew that is spoken in the land of Israel, not the Ashkenazi accent where the T is pronounced as an S, like they will say Ivris instead of Ivrit,
right?
And other things like brachos instead of brachot. If you're interested in having some of these audio files, I'm working right now on taking big files like here's Genesis, and that's 4 hours and 27 minutes and 17 seconds.
Wow.
That's a big file. So I'm breaking these up into smaller files. But I thought it would be useful if everybody had a chance to actually hear the first couple of passages, first couple of verses from Genesis chapter 1, to how it sounds. So I'll ask you to trigger that if you don't mind.
You bet.
And listen to the nature of the articulation, how clear it is, and also the pacing. It's slow enough that if you're using going back to the Art Scroll interlinear, you could follow along with it. So I'll ask you to go ahead and trigger that now, and let's try and follow along with it with my arrow here and see how it is for you.
Let me zoom into your screen just a hair, just so it'll be easy for everybody to see. Okay, here we go. Ready?
בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ. והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו, וחושך על פני תהום, ורוח אלוהים מרחפת על פני המים.
Okay, that's it.
Nice. Oops, there we go. Okay, very good.
Okay, you know what? Let's just listen to it one more time so that people can kind of, because at first it was kind of getting used to it, but now let's hear it one more time and follow along. I don't have the whole verse here at the very end, but you can hear most of it. Go ahead.
Okay, very good.
ראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ. והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו, וחושך על פני תהום, ורוח אלוהים מרחפת על פני המים.
Right. So this is something that I suggest that a person then would do with some consistency, because it's presented for you here clearly, slowly, and if you bring the consistency, I would say maybe 10 minutes a day. Most people can do that. You could take and load a chapter or some verses, whatever. I'll probably break it up by chapters. And you can listen to a chapter in a few minutes, and if you just focus on one chapter, let's say the first chapter of Genesis, and you listen to it over and over and over again along with the reading, you know that for spiritual purposes it's good for you. It's like eating good food, so to speak, soul food. And with time, certain terms become very familiar to you. Common terms start to, like shamayim, heavens, aretz, land. The funny little connector word et ha-shamayim, et ha-aretz, there are other terms, the v for and, b for in or with. These things start to stick with you over time as you hear them. And that's the process that your brain works with best, where you replicate what you did as a child, where you had massive amounts of exposure that eventually became comprehensible and meaningful to you. So we want to replicate that same process here in a guided but manageable, contained way. So that's why I suggest doing this maybe 10 minutes a day. If you want to do more, there's no reason not to. But you don't want to overwhelm your brain either. So a little with consistency beats a lot periodically. Okay, so if you're interested in getting these files, and this is what's available at the moment, it's about 70% of Tanakh. So it's not everything, but it's most things.
Right.
Some of the files here, for example, the book of Psalms, and it's not all of Psalms, but it's most of Psalms, is cantillated. That is to say, it's sort of chanted. So that's a little different than what you just heard now.
Okay.
Sort of like what you hear when the Torah is read.
Right.
And there are a couple of the book of Proverbs is quite fascinating to listen to. It's only about an hour, 30 minutes. But anyway, if you're interested in any of these, you can see what's here. Just send me an email, gavrielsanders@gmail.com. Tell me what you're interested in. And I'm going to be working on making all of this. It's taking this huge project that you can see with these large numbers here and putting it into more bite-sized pieces.
Nice.
Now, the book of Daniel is here, by the way. But about 70%, maybe 60-70% of Daniel is in Aramaic.
Okay.
Which, if you're still working with Hebrew, I don't suggest you tackle Aramaic yet.
Okay, gotcha.
It's a cognate language. It's similar, but it'll throw you.
Okay, very good.
Then the last thing I want to come to is something you and I spoke about earlier today.
Yes.
Really with some input from Rabbi Singer from a conversation that we had last week. And so we're going to do kind of a new program series. I don't think it'll be every week because I'm just extremely busy till the end of the school year. But it's something that I feel I owe a debt to people from, especially Jewish people who were part of the church world where I came from many, many years ago. People have said to me, one of the most common questions that I've gotten in 300 plus lectures that I've done around, really around the world in the last number of years is, have you been able to go back and affect, touch any of the people that you knew before? And the answer mostly has been no. You know, we didn't end on good terms 30 years ago or so. Right. And so I've just kind of quietly grown in my Jewish life. But I feel now is a time that I need to create something that is just sort of a gentle, simple invitation for people to view and think, as I had to do, because I had to really rethink. You know, when I left the church world, it was a horrible tearing. I went into this awful abyss of pain and loneliness and crazy behaviors and just really, that's the chapter I call 8 years of being a goy for nothing. So it took a long time to rebuild. So now what I want to do is part of my own Jewish journey is to help other people do some reflection through what I call Einaim Ptuchot. And that's what we're calling this series, Be'einaim Ptuchot, with open eyes. Former minister, that's me, Gavriel Sanders, reflects on missionary proofs in the Jewish Bible. And we're going to start from pretty much the beginning, and we're going to walk through just in kind of a casual, conversational way, looking at certain passages that were significant to me. I was one of those people. I spent 4 years in Israel as kind of a quiet sort of, I don't know if you want to call it a closet missionary. I wasn't so overt, but it definitely had a missionary agenda in everything that I did, and did, one particular person that helped me get kicked out of the kibbutz, a Jewish girl that was converted to Messianic Judaism while there. And I feel like I have a certain debt, because what I did with sincerity. I was very, very sincere. I was sincerely wrong, but I was certainly very sincere. And the process of learning Hebrew in a secular kibbutz, modern Hebrew, which is like nails on a chalkboard to some purists.
Sure.
But these resources, the Hebrew language in the kibbutz, in the land of Israel, all these things combined together brought me to my Jewish soul. And it was so through the lens of the Hebrew language that I was able to re-examine the 300 plus, 300 texts, proof texts in the Jewish Bible that I used to appeal to as validations that the Messiah had already come, and that there was the first coming, and the suffering servant, and the sacrificial atoning death, the crucifixion, for example, Psalm 22 and Zechariah chapter 10, and the other features that we talk about, just 12, and a lot of these passages I haven't read for a while. But I want to go back and visit those and just have a kind of conversation with people as we go through this and give over things from an insider perspective. I have great regard for what Rabbi Skobac and Rabbi Singer are able to bring from a scholarly point of view, right, as they do, and others that you have here on the channel. This is going to be a bit more subjective from somebody who lived 20 years inside of evangelical Christianity, charismatic Christianity, one who was an ordained minister with one of the charismatic denominations, and worked with a megachurch, one that went from 18 people to over 12,000 people. Not because of me, but right, I was certainly there when there were 800 when I first came there and 10,000 when I left. Wow. So I remember all that very well, and I remember the process of letting go. And one of you and I talked about this earlier today, and with this I want to kind of close. I've never really met, maybe one or two, I've met somebody who said, I was in a hotel and I opened the drawer and there was a Book of Mormon and there was a Bible, and so Book of Mormon, obviously they were staying at a Marriott, right? So they started reading the Bible, and they just became convinced that this was the truth. That's very rare that happens. Right. More often someone's going through an upheaval of some kind, and someone either shares a message of faith or someone prays and they say, I was at a point of desperation and God met me in my desperation, and I had this warm feeling in my heart that was flooded with the love of God, and I knew God was real, and I believed in Jesus.
Right.
And they fall, and as Rabbi Singer talks about this a lot lately, just person has this heart attachment to Jesus, and then over time you start to fill in sort of the theological grid and learn about atonement, soteriology, the doctrine of salvation, and other aspects that we would put into what I learned, in systematic theology in Bible college. So, but none of those things aren't the incentives to, quote, be born again, to be filled with the Spirit, so to speak. Those are on the other side of it. That becomes the justification or the support structure, the intellectual framework by which I say, okay, I'm a Christian because, or the Bible's true because, I believe in Jesus because. You start looking at the prophecies. When you first come to believe, you don't know all those prophecies. Nobody's explained all that. If you have a Jewish person, somebody might have pointed out Psalm 22 or Isaiah 53 or Isaiah 7:14 or some other particular text. And that seems to be compelling because, wow, you can start to connect those dots. And it seems to make sense. Psalm 22, pierced my hands and my feet. Who does that seem to be talking about? Suffering servant, Isaiah 53. Who does that sound like? Isaiah 7:14, virgin birth. Everybody's heard about that, right? Because look at all the Christmas songs that everybody knows. Even the Jewish kids that went to public school, right? They know all those songs. So we're going to kind of walk through this, and I'd really like to do it sort of conversationally with you.
Okay.
So it's a dialogue, not a monologue.
Sure.
And if people have questions or comments on this particular segment that we plan to do, we're really going to create it together. And for those of you that are kind of, I would call, charter members of this fellowship that have been with us for a while, your input. If you've left the church and you've been working on reconstituting your spiritual walk, your path, your relationship with Hakadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem, some of you may be on the path to being, full-blown what we call Noachides, the followers of the Noachide covenant. Others on path to Judaism, some trajectory that way. Let us hear from you. You have stories, you have insights, you have input, and so it's really a forum of conversation that we want to facilitate. Any comments, feedback as we bring this to a close?
I'll just say I really enjoyed earlier in the program also. I really enjoyed the you bringing up the verb book with all the usage. I had a friend of mine who actually let me borrow one for a while, and what's really funny is I didn't know enough about Hebrew at the time to enjoy the book, but now that I'm actually learning more, I'm thinking, oh, I wish he had forgotten that book and left it here. so I'm actually looking forward to actually buying this book and thumbing through it, because it's going to be a great help. The whole binyan process, and yeah, it's going to be an exciting learning. And regarding the latter part of the program, actually in the middle, the audio files that you had me play, that's going to be also incredibly helpful. With the other class that I teach, the other elementary Hebrew. I've actually got to where I've stopped teaching, and now I'm doing nothing but reading, phonetic reading, so that people who are watching it can hear how it's pronounced. But the thing is, I don't know how they're all pronounced. I kind of do, so I just do the best I can, and hopefully that'll help them. This right here is going to be a great tool for me to learn how to do it as well. And if I continue doing that particular recording style, at least I'll be able to do it more accurately now. So that's really good too. And the third and final point, I'm incredibly excited about this new mini-series or series, whatever it is, that we're going to be doing, because I like the idea of having like little small tidbits of like full isolation on one verse or two connected verses together, whatever, and dissecting them and exposing them for what they are. The English, how they have, like Rabbi Singer would say, made a theological crime scene out of, right? I know, I like that too. So we're going to clean up this crime scene and put the little markers down to show what's wrong, where the wrong points are, and what the correct viewpoints are. I say we, you are. I'm just going to host your amazingness and learn a lot from it. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, listen, I am definitely a plain vanilla with no sprinkles. There's nothing special here. You know,
I disagree, but that's me. Oh man.
So I've walked a certain path.
Sure.
That with a lot of uncertainty. I used to be very certain that there was only one way to God, and I knew that way, and I was out to tell you and everybody else that this was it and there was nothing else, and if you didn't believe it, you were going to be burnt toast forever, and God was going to be Godzilla, as we've discussed before. Or you could choose to turn or burn.
Right.
And so I realized, that's so much of that is laced with Greek, Greco-Roman thought forms. It's ridiculous. So, but we know this. We know that Hashem is the creator of the world. We know that Hashem loves all of his creation. And we know that Hashem responds to those who call upon him in truth. And the attitude by which we embrace this is definitely not polemical. Sure. I'm sure that some of our friends from certain ministries will kind of drop in and maybe want to use some of our discussion as fodder for their vitriol and responsa, and that's fine.
Listen, we can't let that.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say we can't let that silence what we're doing here.
No. We invite them to come and think with us.
Absolutely.
So, but the spirit of it here is definitely not one of we're right, you're wrong.
Right.
That's true, but no, I'm joking. But we're really inviting everybody to kind of think through, because as Rabbi Singer and Rabbi Skobac and even Rabbi Kravitz in Los Angeles and others have heard through the years, and I've said as well, it's really not important what I think. Right. It's really important what Hashem has said and what we can grasp in his word that tells us what to hold on to tenaciously, even to the point, if necessary, of giving up one's life. And we know that Jewish history is laced with the blood of many, many, many martyrs who've said no. And I teach, in the high school where I work during the day, one of the classes I teach is modern Jewish history. We start from the time of the Gutenberg Press, the 1450s. It doesn't sound so modern, but really the Gutenberg Press was really sort of the early forerunner of the internet that caused information to spread so rapidly. And just like today's internet with the blogosphere and the ways that people spread their venom, a lot of falseness came into the world as well in print form because it was finally cheap enough to do it. But we start at that point and we cover a lot of territory, and we see the expulsion from Spain in 1492 and Portugal 1497, and what happened in the expulsions from Germany, and then the Jews being pushed into Poland, and then what happened there with the Cossacks and the Chalmenici massacres in 1648 and 49, the Shabtai Tzvi, the false Messiah, and the 300 years worth of damage that he did, really, that reverberated for a long time. A lot of these things that happened, then leading up, of course, the Protestant Reformation, which really didn't reform things so well. The germinal thoughts of which eventually led to manifestations of action towards Jews that we saw in the Holocaust, justifications they went all the way back to Martin Luther because of his ultimate rejection of the Jews rejecting him. He was very friendly when he first began. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. And 20 years later, he was saying, burn their synagogues, burn their books. They shouldn't be allowed to make money. They shouldn't be able to travel freely, restrict their trade, etc. Pretty bad stuff that is part of the heritage of the Christian church today, unfortunately. Right. So a lot of work to do, but our job here is very simple. We're just going to learn the Bible together. We're going to learn what Tanakh says to us, and try to understand these things from that particular point of view, and not to engage in what we know as, eisegesis, reading things into the text from our own agenda. But what does it actually say? We're looking for, like Rashi in his commentary, to brings out what's known as the pshat, the simple meaning of the text. That's where we're going to do our best to focus. Okay. And give everyone then, especially I'm most concerned that those who've kind of let go of their emotional attachment to Jesus, which is a very hard thing to do, that they should have then something solid to hold on to that says, okay, that's not just loosey-goosey, but that's established on a very solid foundation. And as we say, Hashem's word is established forever in the heavens. So we want to stand on that kind of solid ground, all right?
Indeed.
That's where we're going.
Indeed.
Thanks for this program.
Hey, it's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed it as usual, and can't wait to get my hands on those books. So, also can't wait to get my hands on our new miniseries.
Okay.
Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. Definitely go to, if you have any specific questions directly, send it to gavrielsanders@gmail.com. And if you just want to go check up on him eventually, I don't know if your website's back up fully or not, but it would be gavrielsanders.com at some point.
Yep.
So there you go. All right. Shalom, everybody. Thank you, my dear friend, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Shavua Tov to you guys, and we'll see you next time. Shalom, shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. חושבים דוברים לובשים בכל האופנים, זה טבעם של אנשים שונים. נזכור בסוף כולנו שותפים, חשוב תמיד להיות אנושיים. לובשים בכל